Trick or treat, nerds. I'm Alex.
And I'm Dani.
And we're seriously nerdy about a lot of stuff.
And most of those things have to do with the Halloween season, since we've dropped 3 Halloween-themed builds here in the last month and a half.
3?
Yeah.
What? Okay, we had that. The book?
Yeah, we had the cat and the pumpkin.
Oh, we did do 3. So this spooky season, we were walking around our local craft store, and guess what we found?
Hashtag made with Michaels. Boop! This Spooky Town house made by Lemax is intended to be a bookstore. It's the Ghost Rider Antique Bookshop, and it just kind of got our little spoopy noggins turning for how could we take this adorable bookshop and just turn the volume up on it and make it a little bit spookier, give it a storyline, and bring in some really fun textures and colors and just, I don't know, bring it to life in a whole new way.
Growing up, my mom had a bunch of these Halloween Village buildings. We'd arrange them every Halloween. It seemed like a nice throwback to ye old days when I ate candy.
You don't eat candy?
I still eat candy.
Don't
I just
lie
don't.
to the internet. They know.
I can't eat bags of candy.
So this is what we started with for the Ghost Riders Antique Bookstore. It's got a lot of exterior elements and then just an interior that we're going to light. We started off by pulling off a few elements that we wanted to deal with separately.
Fun fact, we have never worked on porcelain or ceramic before, so we dove in and decided to just tremble into this base and see if we could break into the interior diorama. Thankfully, with a few cuts and a little patience, we were able to pry this mummy and typewriter out of his cave like Egyptologists. We also removed the skeleton from the roof. You know, maybe he wants to go inside and read a book or something. But with those exterior elements removed, I got to try my hand at Sculpt-A-Mold. We follow some YouTube makers who swear by this stuff, but we've never tried it before. It is a modeling compound that starts as like lightweight shredded paper and plaster, but it dries and hardens really quickly and sort of lets us smooth out all of these areas of the roof.
It's shingle time, babies! I started off by measuring out what I wanted my shingles to be sized as, and then I immediately started distressing all of my little coffee stirrers. Now, I started out distressing coffee stirrers. I did not end up distressing the majority of them. It turned out to not be worth it. I used this handy device that I got Dani for Christmas the other year, which is designed for cutting interesting angles. I used that to cut just way too many shingles in general. I used some basic tacky glue to attach my little shingle segments, and I basically used the existing layout of the shingles in order to map where I was going to lay my rows. Just hours of shingling. Sometimes this was easier with tweezers, sometimes it was easier with my fingies.
The shingles instantly gave this whole house really lovely detail that it didn't have before because it was just that sculpted porcelain. So it was time to bring it life with some paint. So we broke out the airbrush for a coat of black primer, and it was super important to spray from all different angles just because there's so many eaves and upward angles here. If I'd thought about it at the time, I would have also sprayed the inside because there are some perspectives from the finished house where you can see the plain white porcelain interior. So that is a note for next time.
Now that we have everything based in black, it's time to start actually applying some color to this thing. We did a lot of research and planning up front, so we knew what we wanted to do, and we looked at a lot of reference photos of whimsical Halloween environments, and then Dani mocked them up on Photoshop. We tried some oranges and purples, but decided to go with this very fun teal. It kind of matches our general color aesthetic.
The teal would really help all of the orange elements like the pumpkin and leaves that are going to come in later pop. But at this stage, painting the house in teal was very scary because it looked really cheery spearmint green. Thankfully, bringing in some of these grays to distress it down helped knock some of the joy out of it. One thing that I found is as I brought in the grays to fill these plaster cracks, I could then go back with a light teal highlight and just sort of push the contrast anywhere that this was cracked. It's one thing that we found for miniatures especially. Pushing the contrast helps amplify that believability of paintwork. Now, there was a time that I thought all of the wood on the house would be that bold accent turquoise that we're going to bring in later, but after I got it based in brown, I decided kind of leaving the exposed wood beams was very on trend for right now. But also in this case, it turns out less is more. We didn't need that much turquoise to sort of sell the color scheme. So maybe the witch who owns the bookstore also insists on doing her own upkeep, and she didn't want to crawl over the house constantly to update all of the peeling orange and turquoise paint. So the wood is just fine. The bottom part of the building here also has this sort of cute rock work. We did decide to keep that sort of nondescript and in the same color scheme as the roof, sort of charcoal and black, but with some nice slate blue highlights. Also a nice brown wash to dirty it up.
Dani and I did some Halloween shelves last year that used this beautiful bright blue to highlight everything. So we wanted to do the same thing with this roof, and I gotta say, it never stops being exciting. It brings the whole thing to life. When we took a look at the back windows on this building, we noticed that none of them let any light through. So we wanted to do something to cover them. So Dani cooked up these little shutters that we used to put over the windows. It helped make up for the fact that no light can come through those anyway, and it seemed appropriate for the village that we were making. And then after we attached them, we used the same turquoise color that we used to accent other parts of the building to give them that same flair.
We briefly considered constructing a new, more rustic sign out of wood, but we wanted to leave the bones intact on the Spooky Town business. But I did miss some natural texture, so the solve was to cheat it. So I carefully carved into the plaster with a razor knife. I just needed to give the illusion of wood planks that I could sell later with this paint. Now, I'm no expert with paint. I use really cheap beat-up brushes, and I get by with a lot of luck. But here are 2 tricks I've learned for this faux wood sign effect. Thing 1, think about actual wood texture. So I'm just using a mid-brown and a dark brown and just pulling my brush to resemble wood grain. And sometimes I'll get out one of my really destroyed brushes that has bristles all flared out just to give some pronounced grain lines. Also, if you're trying to mimic planks, respect those shadowy gaps, even here when I'm adding the sort of lettering. Don't try to get too close to the gaps. Thing 2, fun fact, when I worked at Applebee's right before I started college, they would let me write the specials up on the chalkboard, and I learned this trick. I do these little dots to represent the tops of letters. That way you're always sure you have enough space for the whole word before you actually start writing. So that's what all of these little dots are. They're probably professional hand letterers who would provide more insight on how to do this better, but that is my trick. Plan ahead. Top of the dots, letters for spacing. Have some sort of a remote plan before you start. It was working on the signs for the shop that we started to formulate a plan for the story of who runs this business. So in case you're wondering, her name is Gwendla, and she's really into astrology and books. She's an awesome witch who happens to live in the apartment on the second floor. But that's mostly full of books too, just in case you needed to know that. Oh, and she's allergic to cats, and she hates when people assume she has a pet black cat. Because every witch is different, you know? So since Gwendla is really into astrology, we thought that we would scatter a bunch of moons and stars all into her branding, so you'll see us put little moons and stars. I like that, there were just like little celestial elements throughout. She's got a style. We're into it. I really loved that the original building had a faux stained glass window for the second floor. I just wish it had some dimension to it, and I was determined to mimic actual stained glass but on miniature scale. So for this very first attempt, I used green stuff putty to sculpt little lines that would represent the solder between panes of glass. It looked fairly convincing after I got it all in and sort of painted it out in black. And then it was time to throw some shade for color. The shade is color. If you're not familiar with shade, it's like very concentrated ink that stays translucent over whatever you paint it on. In this case, it means that the plexiglass can still glow through and just resembles window panes that are sort of shades of yellow and orange.
So we decided to keep a lot of the features that were sitting on the patio, all of these pumpkin-y boys and this stack of books and candles that sits right in front of the shop. Part of that had to do with us not wanting to over-Dremel this project and really respect some of the elements that existed in the original build. That being said, it made us wonder why exactly Gwendla would want all of these strange, oversized skeletons or pumpkins. We think it's her vibe. It's really how she likes to live her life, you know? Every time we go to that Home Depot and see that massive oversized skeleton, we go, well, gosh, why don't we just put one of those on our patio? And we think Gwendla feels the same way. And let's not forget that Dani can write the smallest open sign using a paintbrush of any human I have ever seen.
So I'm gonna confess here, I did not spend a lot of time thinking about this ground. And that's because, while I was painting this, Alex and I watched the 2002 cult classic Crossroads starring Britney Spears. If you've never seen it, it follows Britney's character Lucy on a cross-country road trip with her childhood friends. And along the way, they eat a lot of snacks, and they sing a lot of covers to songs, and they learn lessons that they'll carry with them forever. Oh, yeah, and the pavement. So I based it in gray, and then I detailed random stones in really high contrast colors. But don't panic, because once I coat them all in this Citadel Agrax Earthshade, they're all going to look very brown and complex, and everyone will think I spent a lot of time on them. But what I really spent time on was thinking about how no one remembers that Zoe Saldana was in Crossroads. Anyway, I also hopped up to the chimney here, based out some of these chimney stones in the same way, painted the edging and detailed the top of the chimney area here. And then it was just a dry brush, a little shade, and time to glue on accessories.
We had bought these adorable little shrubs from some kind of miniature store, and it seemed like a great way to make it look like something was growing in the cracks in between the pavement stones. Dani made some precious little pumpkins using leftover green stuff because it's hard not to use too much green stuff when making anything, and it was fun to place these all around the space and fill out that patio a little bit more with Gwendla's fanaticism over pumpkins. It was about this moment in the project that we realized that the roof was missing a very important detail, and that was beautiful little roof fences. We decided to line out the roof using more coffee stirrers, and then we're going to come back to it later once everything is dried. Since we knew there were going to be vines on this building, we wanted to fill it out with some moss as well. We did a lot of research on moss to see if it was appropriate for the setting, and it turns out that moss loves winter. So Dani mixed up some turf and flocking with some PVA glue into nice little sponges, and then we glued them on in various places on the building.
Okay, friends, so I was determined to figure out how to make my own autumn leaves for this build. And our local hobby shop sometimes sells diorama leaves, but they're imported and kind of expensive, and they were also out of stock. So I figured I could figure it out on my own. I started by painting some watercolor paper with shades of autumn leaves and threw it through my Cricut Joy, but it turns out watercolor paper is just too thick, and even if it had worked, there would be sort of sandwich lines of white in between. So I pivoted first to tissue paper off camera. That was a huge fail. And then to this craft paper that you see here. And again, just throwing some paint on it in the shades of autumn leaves and running it through the Cricut Joy. This one worked out very well. And as a bonus, we will give you the SVG file if you want to print your own tiny leaves. So this was the fail and this was the success. Thanks, craft paper. And it turns out scraping these into a pile was way too satisfying. And there was a point in the build where I was just going to keep these for myself because they're very fun to play with. But thankfully, I pried myself away and started gluing these around. And the most difficult part of it is just figuring out how to place them so they look like they've been scattered naturally. It's much harder than it sounds. I think our human instinct is to sometimes space things a little too unnaturally.
Now that everything on the roof had dried, we went back and glued some basswood on here to give the roof some more structure. And then we went in and glued down the roof fences, which look adorable and very spoopy and just like a gothic horror novel. Then Dani went in and painted the base of the roof the same brown as the rest of the wood and dry brushed all of these edges with a nice silver so that it looks metallic.
If you've ever wondered about the structure of the interiors of these little Halloween houses, this is it! And thankfully our skeleton friend and the wallpaper sticker peeled right off. We wanted to show off Gwendla inside stocking the shelves. We just had to figure out how much real estate we had for her and all of her accessories. We will put a link in the description for our favorite tried and true 3D print files for all of this furniture. We use those again to resize a narrow bookcase with a ladder rail and a few stacks of books for the floor. The blue background was just there to help with the contrast against the brown and orange books, and you don't even end up noticing it much. We really wanted Gwendla to be a classic green witch for, Halloween vibes, keeping it classic. She's actually a pewter tabletop wizard figure from Reaper. Her name is Juliet, technically. But since she's pewter, I was able to clip off her base and bend her feet a bit so that she looked like she was positioned on the ladder pretty nicely. For the books on the shelves, I realized it would be easier to just quickly knock these out in styrofoam since you wouldn't be able to see a lot of detail once the interior platform was installed back inside. So these are really quick and dirty, but they totally work. We wanted to be sure that the little interior diorama took up as much space as possible, but there are definitely space constraints in order to still be able to fit inside the house. So we added a corner wall there at the left side, and we angled the bookcase on the right, just to try to make it look like there were books everywhere inside. And thankfully, the new interior just barely fit into the building and we were able to glue it in place. To finish it off, we put the original window back in place and glued it in, and then I just gave it a quick swipe of paint to suggest a little wooden window pane around it. And voila! Window Gwendla! So that is how you glow up a tiny spooky house. And let me assure you, if we can do it, anybody can do it. So we hope that this inspires you to check out the sales section at your local craft store and know you can bring home any of those cute little ceramic houses. Use stuff that you have around your house to make them your own.
Yeah. What did we learn?
So
many things. I learned that you have never cut enough shingles. I'm still not sure I've cut enough shingles.
It's true.
I have extra shingles, but
he wakes up at night and cuts shingles in his sleep.
I sleep shingle.
So many of the components from this we already had. I don't know, we bought a whole lot other than the witch figurine. It really is like coffee stirrers or diorama stuff that we had already laying around. So I'm a big believer in use what you've got.
We learned the magic of making your own leaves.
Oh, that was a fun one. You're welcome for that, Internet. It only took me 3 tries and most of my sanity. Fall leaves make everything look very sort of cheerful. Kind of who we are as people. Spoopy and cheerful.
Cheerfully spoopy.
Yeah.
I learned that Dani is wildly gifted when it comes to painting tiny wooden signs. I mean, are you kidding me?
Thanks.
That was crazy. Now the whole internet knows.
Graphic design. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. We will be back very soon with a super exciting tiny project that I've been dreaming about for several months. So stay tuned for that.
And now, let's see that final footage. I see, I did witchy noises. And
Was
you
that
did
witchy?
You didn't think that was witchy?
It's a little witchy.
Oh, we'll try again.
That's like maybe a cat. What up, nerds? I'm Alex. Uh-oh.
Why'd you say my name?
Trick or treat. Woo!
Ooh, spoopy.
Definitely real. Definitely witchcraft. Shingle and ready to mingle.
I hate that.
I hate it so
That's
much.
the worst.